between us and the ancient world stand a series of innovations that have made it progressively easier to write and reproduce texts. At the recent end of that series is the digital revolution, which has made it possible to generate and store information on a scale unimaginable even a few decades ago. But before the typewriter or the printing press, before paper or parchment, cursive script, or the first bound book, there was the papyrus scroll. The papyrus reed is native to the marshes of the Nile Delta. Early in their history, the Egyptians discovered that the fibrous inner pith of the plant's stem could be cut into strips and pressed together to make a smooth and durable writing surface. Sheets of papyrus were pasted together to make scrolls. The average height of a scroll was about 10 inches, or 25 centimeters. The length ranged from 10 to more than 80 feet, that is, from about 3 to 25 meters. The scroll was often wrapped around a wooden or ivory rod, to which an identifying tag might be tied. The Greek or Latin text in a scroll was written as a continuous string of capital letters, with only cursory attempts at punctuation. Scientific works, like the Vienna Dioscorides manuscript, were illustrated. So were deluxe editions of literary classics, like the Vatican Virgil. There were many grades of papyrus, ranging from the polished royal sheets on which sacred texts were inscribed to the rough scraps that wrapped fish and chickpeas in Roman markets. Although good papyrus was never cheap, it was affordable and abundant enough to fuel the production of what was, by pre-modern standards, an incredible number of books. The extant works of the great Roman doctor Galen, for example, run to more than 3 million words. The tireless Alexandrian scholar Didymus, nicknamed Bronze Guts for his inhuman work ethic, wrote more than 2,000 books, so many that he reportedly forgot half of them. The city of Rome had a thriving book market, in which dozens of sellers produced new editions and sponsored author readings to capture customers. So many Roman connoisseurs browsed shops for rare editions that unscrupulous sellers took to producing faux antique scrolls, artificially aged by being buried in grain. By late antiquity, the city of Rome could boast 28 major public libraries, and most substantial provincial cities had at least one. These could be very substantial. The Library of Timgad, on the edge of the Sahara, may have contained over 20,000 volumes. Some private libraries were even larger. One 3rd-century scholar reportedly owned more than 60,000 books. The greatest of all ancient libraries, of course, was the Library of Alexandria. Our sources disagree on the number of scrolls it contained. One Byzantine scholar claimed that there were 400,000 books containing multiple works, 90,000 devoted to a single work, and an additional 42,800 outside the main complex, a total of 532,800. Two Roman texts record that no fewer than 700,000 volumes were lost when the library burned. However many books the Library of Alexandria contained, and however many of those books were lost when it went up in flames, the loss of all but a tiny fraction of ancient literature was not brought about by the disappearance of a single library. It was, instead, a consequence of the basic fragility of texts before the advent of printing. Before we explore that, a brief word about this video's sponsor. ProForm Technologies is a family-owned company with a proud 32-year history of providing print, promotional, and apparel to large and mid-sized companies across America. If you're responsible for purchasing such products for a large or mid-sized firm, consider partnering with ProForm for all your branding needs. To learn more about ProForm's services, follow the link in the description. A brief note before we continue. I've always enjoyed working with small businesses like ProForm and Whoosh Drains of Astoria, Queens. If you own or manage a small or mid-sized business and would like to introduce your product or services to a global audience of hundreds of thousands, consider advertising here on Told & Stone. Email me at toldandstone@gmail.com to find out more. Back to our topic. Papyrus scrolls could last a long time. Some of the scrolls found in the Villa of the Papyri at Herculaneum were more than 300 years old when Vesuvius carbonized them. Alcuin of York, writing at the end of the 8th century, saw papyrus scrolls at Tours that must have been at least half a millennium old. In the humid climates of Western Europe, however, most papyri had to be recopied every century or so. When the economy was healthy and there was strong demand from a prosperous and cultivated elite, this wasn't a problem. Large workshops of professional copyists efficiently produced more than enough texts to supply the market. But when the Roman Empire collapsed, the elites who had traditionally commissioned new copies all but vanished. Far fewer manuscripts were produced, and those that were tended to serve the particular purposes of religion, education, and the technical disciplines. Authors who wrote in unfamiliar dialects on topics repugnant to the church or at inordinate length were not recopied and faded into oblivion. Another barrier to survival was the invention of the codex, the prototype of the modern book. From the 1st century onward, to keep personal notes and accounts, the Romans used notebooks with leaves of parchment, a writing material made from the tanned skins of sheep, goats, or cattle. The codex format was adopted by the growing Christian community, which preferred codices to scrolls for the ease of referencing scripture. Partly through Christian influence, codices definitively displaced scrolls over the course of the 3rd and 4th centuries. Any text not copied to a codex by the end of antiquity was unlikely to survive the Middle Ages. Another technological change occurred over the course of the 9th century when, in both Greek and Latin, cumbersome ancient scripts were replaced by cursive hands that facilitated copying and reading. Texts not reproduced in the new minuscule scripts were forgotten. For all these reasons, the population of manuscripts was much smaller in the Middle Ages than it had been in antiquity. A single manuscript found at the Abbey of Monte Cassino, for example, is responsible for our knowledge of Tacitus's histories, and the first 6 books of the same author's annals existed only in another manuscript found at the German Abbey of Corvey. Many Greek classics, likewise, were preserved only in 1 or 2 copies at Constantinople. A single disaster could thus be extremely destructive. The sack of Constantinople in 1204, for example, destroyed the final remaining copies of dozens of ancient works that had survived to that point. But the last examples of most lost Greek and Roman classics died quietly, decaying for centuries on monastery shelves until they were swept away with the dust. If you're interested in more Told in Stone content, including my podcast, check out my channel, Told in Stone Footnotes. I also have a channel called Scenic Routes of the Past, which is dedicated to historically themed travel. You'll find both channels linked in the description. Please consider joining other viewers in supporting Told in Stone on Patreon. You might also enjoy my book, Naked Statues, Fat Gladiators, and War Elephants. Thanks for watching.